Hey everybody, it's Seth Jones, editor-in-chief of Golfdom Magazine. Today I'm being joined by Dr. Rich Hurley. Is there a day that stands out to you as any particularly memorable day from work that you kind of like to think back and you go like, yeah, that was quite a day?
I've got a couple. One is when I was finishing college at Rhode Island, I was finishing my master's degree and I had two firm job offers. One was to be a golf course superintendent at a course called Tavistock, very nice private club outside of Philadelphia, in New Jersey, very nice club. And I had a second job offer to go to work for Peter Loft, who was the president of Loft Seeds. And this was in 1972. And Peter wanted me to come with him and be his director of research. And I loved golf so much, I wanted to be a superintendent. So I turned him down and I took the job as being a superintendent. I kept in contact with Peter through the years. So then we get to 1978 in the summer. Peter calls me up and he says, the fellow that I hired is leaving to go to Clemson University to be the turf professor. And I'd like you to come and be my director of research and go back to school to Rutgers, because Loft Seeds was located only 15 minutes from the campus in New Jersey, in New Brunswick, and get my Ph.D. working under Dr. Funk. And so he hit me with it, and I really was happy where I was. And I turned him down. And he calls me up 3 weeks later and he says, you're making a big mistake. He says, I want you to come. And he went through, he says, go back to school, get your PhD in turf breeding. And so I accepted, and that was it. And there's another, and you talk about the day. So that was in the summer of 78. So a side note to this story, and this is really fascinating. When I look back on it, how lucky I am, is that Peter's best friend in college was a fellow named George Whistler. And George Whistler was a great golfer. He was a scratch golfer. And Peter and George grew up together, and they went to Lawrenceville Prep School in New Jersey. And then they went on to Yale University together, and they were friends. They both graduate. George goes into banking, and he ends up in Atlanta, Georgia. He's in the financing. And Peter takes a job with his father's company, Loft Seed Company. And then the years go by, and they stay in contact. Well, in the early 70s, George was invited to go play Augusta. So he goes for a weekend in Augusta. And this was when Clifford Roberts was alive. And Clifford Roberts was the founder of the Augusta National with Bobby Jones. And George goes out, and on the Saturday, he hits the famous par 5 13th hole in 2, and he sinks the putt for an eagle. And on Sunday, he does the same thing. He hits it the hole in 2 shots, sinks the putt for an eagle. Clifford Roberts hears about this and gets a hold of George and says, George, I'd like to ask you to join the club. So George becomes a member of the Augusta National because of this weekend there. So Peter and George are best friends. And now we fast forward where I take up the job with Peter in the fall of 78. And now I'm the new director of research, and I'm just starting graduate school. And George arranges that immediately I'm on the advisory committee of the Augusta National turf program.
Wow.
Peter had been selling seed The Loft Seed Company had been selling Augusta seed since the late 60s. So there was already a connection there that Loft Seed was selling the seed. Peter's best friend was George Whistler, and I was Peter's man. And so immediately I'm on the committee. So this coming Masters will be my 43rd. I was on the advisory committee. I also volunteered for the tournament Sunday through Sunday. I did that for 30 years. And then I retired in 2008 from doing that. And they gave me 2 badges for life. So I go back each year.
That's awesome. It's incredible.
And so you talk about luck of being in the right place at the right time. And George and I were friends for many, many years. And Peter was a great guy. He died at an early age of a brain tumor. And it was very sad. And he loved golf. I can tell you another side note to that.
Yeah.
So Peter loved going to Augusta. So this was, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 1980. He still wanted to go to the Masters. So in 1980 and 81, I took him to the Masters. He was very, very sick in 82. And so he had to spend his time really in the cabin, in the Firestone cabin with George Whistler. Couldn't go out on the golf course because he was so weak. I had a relationship at that time with Arnold Palmer because we named a variety Palmer ryegrass. And actually, Arnold Palmer was the spokesman for Loft Seeds. So I went up. It was 1982, I think. And so I went up to Arnold and I said, "Mr. Loft is really bad shape. Would you come over to the Firestone cabin and say hello to him?" And I remember Arnold saying to me, he says, "Well, if I go outside these ropes, I'm going to get mobbed." And I said, "I'll keep the crowds away and we'll get over there." So took him over. Arnold came over to the Firestone cabin. And when Peter saw Arnold come in, as weak as he was, he popped out of the chair and they shared some nice words. So that was really a nice story. And Arnold Palmer, if you've ever met him, all the stories about Arnold and Winnie are true. He was really a fantastic person, and his wife Winnie was the same way. I don't know how they did it. They remembered thousands of names,
Yeah,
and
I've heard that.
for some reason they couldn't remember the name. They made you feel so comfortable, but they were just 2 lovely, lovely people.